I haven't been too long in this area here, but from the winds we've been having, I thought maybe this would be a good talk. Can you sleep on a windy night? But we want to welcome you to the start of our week of activity, because this will culminate in our assembly, the theme of which is Let Us Serve Jehovah Whole Souled. This is a circuit assembly. And the circuit assembly, you'll find, is different than most. This is an assembly that's, the whole program in detail is outlined by the writing staff of the governing body. It's very strong. It's very direct. It's of a district assembly caliber. So it'll help you appreciate what must be done in order for all of us to get life. Because the way things stand now, all of us won't get life. And this assembly is designed for that purpose. So I thought maybe because the assembly is so direct, we might have start off our week by just telling you a story, if you like stories. But the story has a point, and let's see if you can get the point. Now, this story has to do with Farmer Brown, and Farmer Brown lived in the Midwest. Now, have any of you here in the audience lived in the Midwest at all, or any of you from that area? One or several? All right, well, then you'll understand the story. It has to do with Farmer Brown, and he lived in the Midwest with Mrs. Brown. They had a nice little farm, and it was the fall of the year. So in the fall of the year, you all know that there's lots of work to be done during the harvest time, so they went to town to see if they could get some hired help. And when they got into town, they found that they had done something wrong. They had got there a little late, and so all the good hired help had been already taken by the other farmers round about. No one was left in town except one young fellow they found standing over by the pool hall. Looked like he was lonesome, and no one seemed to want to hire him. So they decided they better go over and see if they could hire him, because they needed help badly. So they went over and asked his name, and they found out his name was John. They asked John, well, Farmer Brown said, what are your qualifications for working on a farm during the fall of the year? He said, well, I can sleep on a windy night. Farmer Brown thought, well, those are certainly no qualifications for working on a farm. We want workers, not sleepers. But Mrs. Brown prodded Farmer Brown and said, well, Farmer Brown, we better hire him, because that's all there is. There are no other workers. And he looks big and strong, and he was. Had lots of calluses in his hands, well tanned. It looked like he was a worker. So Mrs. Brown said, now look, John, we need workers. What are your qualifications? He said, well, I can sleep on a windy night. He wouldn't change his story. So they decided to, after looking at each other with a puzzled look, they decided to hire him, because that's all there was. So they hired John, took him out and explained his duties to him and showed him where he would sleep and all, and John went right to bed. But first thing in the morning, he was up, out there doing the chores before breakfast, and he was out in the field all day. He worked hard. Didn't seem to do anything wrong. But they watched him real close, because they thought he sure was a strange one. And they watched him real close, and they could find nothing wrong with what he did. And they couldn't understand what John possibly meant by saying, I can sleep on a windy night. They couldn't understand it at all. And they noticed something strange about him, though. He was always a little late coming in the evening after doing the chores for supper, and he always kept Farmer Brown waiting. Farmer Brown was in there ready for supper, and old John was hokey-pokey coming into his supper table. But they thought, well, maybe that's just John. And everything went along real fine for about 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden, one day, while they were out in the field, the temperature seemed to be building all day long. And about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 3, the temperature was unbearable. Got up to around 110. And there wasn't a breath of air moving. Deathly still. Now, any of you who have lived in the Midwest, when it gets extremely hot during the day and deathly still, not a breath of air moving, what does that tell you is about to take place? Sister? There's a storm brewing. That's right. And Farmer Brown could sense it. And he was nervous as a cat all day long, just edgy and worried about all the things he had to be done and so on. But it didn't seem to bother John a bit. John was just as calm as he could be. And then when they got ready to do their chores, they were in there doing their chores, and John was still always late coming in for supper, and Farmer Brown was edgy tonight especially, and he was cursing under his breath, that no good John, always dragging his feet and takes so long to get in here, we got to get our supper ready and eat, and he was so worried about everything, and he just paced up and down, and finally John came in and they ate their supper, and right away John, of course, he went off to bed like usual. He worked hard during the day, so he was tired. And Farmer Brown, he could hardly get to bed. He was so worried and so nervous. Finally, he decided, after he looked out the window before he went to bed, he could smell the storm in the air. Just smell it. You know what it's like. You can almost taste it. It's so close. And so he finally decided to go to bed, and he went to bed. And when he finally got to sleep, the storm hit. The house just rocked on the foundation. The shutters banged, and the shingles flew, and Farmer Brown was out of bed like a shot. grabbed his trousers to put them on, and he told his wife, "You get up there and get that John out of bed. We've got to get out there and see if we can save something. We're going to lose everything we've got in this storm." Oh, he was worried. So he got his trousers on, and his wife ran up the stairs and banged on the door and said, "John, get up. You've got to help Farmer Brown." And they couldn't get John out of bed. She banged on the door some more and said, "John, you've got to get up and help Farmer Brown." But they couldn't get John out of bed. And Farmer Brown slipped on his shoes and he ran outside cursing that no good John. Why did we hire him in the first place? And he ran out there to see what he could save, because he could see he was going to lose everything he had. The chickens, the barn, the cattle, the sheep, the whole thing were going to be blown away in the storm. So he ran over to the chicken house first thing. It was the closest. And he was going to close the door and window so he wouldn't lose all his best laying hens. But when he got there, he noticed that the door was closed and the windows were closed and the old hens were all inside there on the roost with the old rooster just as happy as could be. Then they decided he better run over to the barn and see if he could save the barn, because if the door was left open in the barn, the wind would blow in and blow off the roof and he'd lose all of his prize milking stock. But when he got around to the barn door was already closed. The windows were closed and the old cows were laying down just chewing their cud. Then he thought about the haystack they'd put up that day. He could see that haystack blowing all over the field again. So he ran around the barn and see if he could tie it down with the tarpaulin, and he got around behind the barn, and the haystack was already tied down. Then he thought about his prize sheep. He had a whole flock of sheep here, getting them ready for the fair. All the ewes were all curried, and the old ram looking just at their best, and he could see them wandering off in the storm and being lost and losing the blue ribbon at the fair. Worried sick about those sheep, and he ran around the barn to see what he could do about those sheep, and what do you think he saw? Why, they were all in the sheep pen, just bedded down so cozy and all locked up tight. Then old Farmer Brown got the idea. What John meant when John said, "I can sleep on a windy night." Now the question, brothers, is this. To get serious, can you sleep on a windy night? Because haven't you sensed a storm a-brewing? Well, you think these kingdom halls are packed. The people can sense the storm. It's been brewing since 1914. Now you can smell it in the air. It's so strong you can see it building in the west, as it were. And it's building at such a rate it has the human race on the verge of panic, not knowing what to do about the problem. The question is, can you sleep when the storm hits? Do you have all things secure like John did, or will you run around in a panic like Farmer Brown trying to accomplish something the last minute? Well, let me tell you, this storm is a serious storm. Now, to appreciate how serious it is, let's read what the Scriptures have to say, and then find out what the Watchtower has been saying about this. Turn in Matthew to the 24th chapter, and notice what it has to say in verse 21. And here you'll notice it's Jesus talking. Now, notice what Jesus himself said. He said, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the world's beginning until now. No," he said, "nor will occur again." In other words, there's never been a storm like this, and there never ever will be in the future a storm like this. If man lives on this earth to be billions of years, nothing equals it. The storm in Noah's day was nothing compared to this storm. That's what Jesus said. Then he goes on to say, to show you how bad it gets to be, when he says, in fact, notice this, a little added point, in fact, it's so bad, he says, unless those days were cut short, no flesh would be saved. But on account of the chosen ones, those days will be cut short. So that indicates that unless this storm is stopped, it'll kill you and I and every human and every animal on this earth. Every fleshly creature will cease to exist, according to Jesus. So that sounds like it's a bad storm. Now, in order to go through a storm like that, you'd have to be prepared, wouldn't you? They were in Noah's day, had to be prepared. The ones that survived were prepared. The ones that were destroyed were those not prepared. Any kind of a storm that ever hits the humans on this earth, only those who prepare for it adequately survive. Now, we're talking about a storm that makes all other storms look like nothing. Now, turn over here to the book of Jeremiah, and let's find out a little more about how bad this might get. Jeremiah, we might read the scripture in the 25th chapter here, and notice what he says. Jeremiah 25, and let's just read verses 30 through 33 here, and notice what he says about this. "And as for you, you will prophesy to them all these words, and you must say to them, from on high, Jehovah himself will roar." Now see, that's why the storm is so bad, because the Creator himself is furious. He's in his rage against the world of mankind. So he says, and from his holy dwelling place he will give forth his voice. Without fail he will roar upon his abiding place. A shout like that of those treading the winepress he will sing out against all the inhabitants of the earth. Brothers, that involves you and I. When he says all inhabitants, that means you, your family, me, all of us are directly involved in this storm. So he says, a noise will certainly come to be clear from the farthest parts of the earth, for there is a controversy that Jehovah has with the nations. He must personally put himself in judgment with some flesh. Is that what it says? No, it says all flesh. You and me are directly involved in being judged here. So he says, as regards the wicked ones, he must give them to the sword, is the utterance of Jehovah. Now this is what Jehovah of armies has said. Look, a calamity is going forth from nation to nation, and a great tempest itself will be roused up from the remotest parts of the earth. And those slain by Jehovah will certainly come to be in that day from one end of the earth, clear to the other end of the earth. Neither will they be gathered up or wailed, neither will they be gathered up or buried. As manure on the surface of the ground, they will be or become. So it shows us here that those who will be destroyed will not be wailed. They will not be gathered up or buried. They'll become like manure on the surface of the ground. How many people do you think this is talking about when he talks about that type of destruction? Let's say in an area of Los Angeles, how many individuals could this involve in this destruction? Sister? 800,000? Well, there could be that many. Yeah, there's around 10 million people in this metropolitan area of Los Angeles. You're talking around 10 million, 9 or 10 million dead people in this area. You think that's true? You think this is really going to happen? That God will really destroy all these people? All these little babies? Older men and women? You think he's actually going to do this? Or is this just a story? My brothers, this is no story. We're talking about what is actually going to take place in the very near future on this earth, right in our little vicinity here. Now, this is serious business. Now, when you talk about 8 or 10 million people in this area, what do you think it involves, like in Tokyo, London, Paris, all the major cities of the world? How many people on the earth do you think this is talking about that will lay like manure on the ground? Any idea?
Over 3.5 billion.
That's what it'll involve. Over 3.5 billion people. How many people do you think it'll involve in the Rialto area? Well, I don't know how many people live in Rialto. Maybe some of you do or do not, but it'll involve the biggest percent of your population. Unless something drastically takes place to change that, to change something. So this becomes a serious business. Now notice he says they will not be wailed. Now we're going to find out a bit more about that later as to why they will not be wailed. But the interesting thing about this is, this destruction here sounds like a mess on this earth. Now remember in Bangladesh when they had a storm over there a year or so ago, there were several 100,000 that were killed. Remember what the problem was when they tried to fly food in there with helicopters? Did any recall what happened? Why they couldn't fly the food in? Sister Durrell? The stench of the dead bodies, and there were only around 200,000 or 300,000 dead. What do you think it'll be like when there's 8 or 10 million in an area like this? You think it's going to affect you? I'll say it's going to affect you. No matter how strong you are, it's going to affect you. In fact, the Watchtower, if you read the Watchtower, this is the December 15th Watchtower, did you read about what took place back there in ancient Jerusalem and then in ancient Babylon at the destruction of ancient Jerusalem? How it affected the people? Let me read you. Here's what it says. Now this deals with Ezekiel's prophecy of that the people back there would be in total fear because of the destruction brought on Jerusalem. It says, the prophetic report of the frightful destruction to come upon Jerusalem was reason enough for Ezekiel to sigh and shake. Now Ezekiel was in Babylon. The destruction was the destruction here was in Jerusalem, and all these many Jews were in ancient Babylon, had been taken captive, and Ezekiel was there amongst them. Now he goes on to say, when the report was fulfilled, that is, the destruction actually took place, the news of Jerusalem's destruction reached Babylon. The hitherto unbelieving Jewish exiles there must have given way to horrified excitement. Their knees likely dripped with more than mere sweat. Doubtless, they were so frightened in spirit that the sphincter muscles of their bladder released, causing their knees to drip with urine. Now, when you have a nation of people involved like that, you've got fright and fear upon the people. But notice what it says about you and I. It says this: the destruction to come upon Christendom will even be more frightening than it was back there. That's why when it says this destruction takes place, brothers, you and I are directly involved. Even if we are not killed, it's going to bring tremendous fear to the people. It's going to be a terrible destruction. The worst man has ever seen, or even you can't even conjure up in your mind how bad this is going to be. So it says, the prophetic report of that calamity contained in God's Word deeply stirred the inward feelings of Jehovah's Christian witnesses. Their concern about the safety of fellow humans then is now motivating Jehovah's Witnesses to be diligent in proclaiming this report so that others might take steps to escape destruction. Then they ask this very pertinent question: are you responding to that report? Then another question: is it causing you to take positive action to seek God's righteousness before he acts? Now, this little article here is one that's entitled, "The God of Justice Will Act." And what he says in Matthew about the storm, what it says in Jeremiah, what it says in Ezekiel, and what it says in our notebook about total world panic, brothers, is true. We're going to be affected very strongly, the strongest one amongst us. Don't take it lightly. Don't be like Farmer Brown thinking, oh, well, when it hits, I'll get things organized. You cannot organize once the storm hits. Now, the faithful and discreet slave have been telling you and I exactly what to do over the years. That's why they ask questions like this at the end of an article. Are you responding to that report? Is it causing you to take positive action to seek God's righteousness before he acts? They're asking us those questions to get us to think. Now, I don't know how to survive this storm. I haven't the slightest idea. I don't know when it's going to hit, how it'll affect me. And neither do you. That's why we have to listen to every word that the faithful slave says. All the instructions we're given, we have to adhere to the exact letter of what it's telling us. Because this is serious business. We're not talking about some little wind like we had the other night. We're talking about everything laying level in a mass destruction of multi-billions of people throughout the earth. Now, the faithful and discreet slave, like I say, has been telling us exactly what to do. And I don't know when this storm is going to hit. And I know you don't. But some among us think it's not going to hit for many years in the future. Well, we'll hear at the assembly what the society tells us as to when this is going to hit. 1975 is not such an important date. Although 1975 is that's only 24 months. Is that all it is away? 24 months. That's only 104 weeks. 104 weeks. I can remember it wasn't so long ago it was 100 months away. Now it's down to 24. That's just around 800 and some days for 1975. But I don't know when it's going to come, and neither do you. And neither does the faithful slave. But the interesting thing is, let's say 1975 we're here, and here we are. It's going to come somewhere in here or maybe a little over here. We don't know. More than likely, though, they feel it could come over here. But the interesting thing is, it says in Ecclesiastes 3:1 that Jehovah has an appointed time for everything. Now that means he knows exactly where it's going to come. He's got it already precisely outlined as to when it'll take place, right to the minute and second. And it says in Revelation 16:15 that it comes as a thief. Now thieves, they come in when no one's looking. Surprise you. Or like it says in Luke 21:35, it comes as a snare. And at the assembly you'll have it here it said, outlined by the governing body, that it will come as though a steel trap snapped shut. That's how quick it will come. One of these days you'll be at a meeting or at home or somewhere, and all of a sudden it's through. The storm has hit, that's it. Now, when steel traps, brothers, snap shut, they do catch things in them. And we don't want it to catch any of us. That's why we ask the question, can you sleep on a windy night? Do you have all the sheep in this territory in the pen? Maybe I could ask the elders here. Do you already have all of them in the territory into the pen here? Are they all here? What do some of you elders think? Brother? Ullum? There's one elder. Let's get another elder's view. What do some of you elders think? They're not all in the pen. What do some of you publishers think? There's a pioneer talking that way, but maybe these pioneers, they get too aggressive. Well, brother, what do you think? You think there's more out there, too? Sister Durrell? That's exactly it. That's exactly the point. They are not all in the pen. Now, the question is, have you been out there like the pioneers looking for those sheep? Or let me ask you this, do you even know where they are? Or does your convenience come ahead of the sheep? Well, we've learned that once we make a dedication, this individual doesn't matter. His convenience comes second or third. Jehovah's interest comes first, just like Jehovah sacrificed his son for those people out there. So do we know where they are? Have you been searching for them diligently? Or more important, let's get it down right to home. How about your own immediate family? Are they secure? You wives, is your husband whole-souled in his dedication and showing it by his action? You husbands, is your wife whole-souled, showing it by her action? Is she secure? How about your children? And you children, how about your parents? Because let me tell you, Jehovah's not a sympathetic God. He's not one that's controlled by sympathy and emotions. And either we've built a monument of integrity based on a whole-soul dedication, or we haven't a Chinaman's chance. And by the way, maybe the Chinamen have a pretty good chance. But the thing is, we want to think about how secure is my family. Now, we can't take the attitude that we're not going to go through with this, that maybe somehow it'll all go away, that it won't really come upon us after all. Just like, it kind of reminds me of the young couple on the way to the hospital with their first baby. Maybe you heard about them. And as they were get to the hospital, they were stopped by all these traffic lights, and the poor husband, he's breaking out in sweat, and she's having these labor pains, and he says to his wife finally, well, honey, are you sure you want to go through with this? Well, we're going through with it, brothers, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. No matter how bad it's going to get, we all have to go through with it. You can go back to the Catholic Church or wherever you want, but you still are going to go through with it. You can give token service to Jehovah if you want, but you're still going to go through with it. You can be whole soul if you'd like, and you're still going to go through with it. All of us have to go through this storm, one way or the other. There's no way for any human to avoid this storm. Not only for any human, but for Satan and his demons cannot even avoid the storm. So everyone's involved in this because the Creator is furious, and everything under the Creator is involved. And that involves you and I. Now, we might be able to coast right up to Armageddon, but you're not going to coast through it, brothers. Just because you've got a publisher's card or been baptized 20 years, that has little to do with it. The only thing that will get you through that is, well, we're going to read it in a minute. But it's very important that we analyze ourselves and recognize that Jehovah's serious about this. Now, I want you to read a scripture here in Revelation to build to a point here in the 14th chapter. And notice what it says here in verses 6 and 7. Notice this good point. I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, and he had everlasting good news to declare as glad tidings to those who dwell on the earth. Now, this angel flying in mid-heaven, who is he? What's he responsible for, would you say? I know you're all Jehovah's Witnesses, so come on. All right, sister? Right. That's the one under the Christ. Now, we read in the January 1st Watchtower how the Christ is supervising the work through the angels, and then under the angels, who comes right under the angels? This angel here that are doing the work. All right, sister? Yes, and specifically the governing body of that faithful slave. So we have the Christ supervising the angels and the governing body directing this work. Now, get this point. Now, it says the angel here is flying in mid-heavens, and he has everlasting good news to declare as glad tidings to those who dwell on the earth, and to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. So he has this glad tidings to give to all people. Even the nations have this good news brought to them. Then it says, the angel is saying in a loud voice, fear God and give him glory. Those are the two things we are supposed to do. And the reason is because the hour of the judgment by him has arrived. Now, who do you think is being judged here? Anyone specifically, do you think? Brother Johnson? All mankind's being judged here. That's why you better fear God and do exactly like it says, obey his commandments, because the hour, and give him glory, because the hour of judgment by him has arrived. So worship the one who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the fountains of water. Now that's good advice given by the angel. And if that advice is ignored in any way, it will bring about your death. If it's followed, it will give you life. Now it says here though, and I wonder, the angel is saying in a loud voice, fear God and give him glory. Well, I don't hear any loud voice. Do you? So, brother? Oh, all right, very good. That's the way it comes down through. But us, the witnesses, we go out in the street and we make this declaration with a loud voice. It's being heard all over the earth. But how do we, as Jehovah's people, how do we get this loud voice? He touched on it, but more specifically, where does it come from? Sister Johnson? Yes, specifically this watchtower. What I was reading you was a loud voice from the angel. The angel is saying, brothers, that the destruction to come upon Christendom will soon be even more frightening than it was back there with ancient Jerusalem. That's the angel telling you in a loud voice. Do you listen to the voice? Now, when the angel tells us these things, and tells us, and they've told us in this magazine what we have to do, that you and I have to become deeply involved, we have to be zealous, like the January 1st Watchtower says, we must be on fire with zeal. It should have consumed us, the doing of Jehovah's will. Do you believe what the angel says? Well, if I ask for a show of hands, you'd all say, oh yes, I believe what the angel says. But if I were to watch you over a period of days or weeks, I may find out that your action betrays you. Now, let me tell you why I might say that, is because what has happened within the organization in the last year, I've seen it in the last few months, but let's say the last year. Well, what about attendance at meetings? What's it like? Is it going down? Well, look, the hall's jammed. Brother Johnson? Meetings are going way up sharply. Every congregation are running over 100%. Some are running as high as 130 or 40 or 50% and more. But what's happened to the field service? Sister? It's steadily dropping. Now, something's wrong. Someone's got the wrong idea. They think you're going to get life at a Kingdom Hall? Forget it. Only those who are whole-souled in their dedication get the life. It's fine to come here to learn and to understand, but unless we'll go out there and put it into practice with those that Jesus died for, it's of no value whatsoever. Just like Farmer Brown. Unless you've got things secure because we have done the work we've been assigned to do, forget it. It's a total waste. Now, I want to show you a point here about sometimes individuals, they'll say they believe something, and like many of us have been baptized, and we say, yes, I'm dedicated. And yet their action betrays that we're not really that way from within the heart. Now, notice here this other account in the book of Genesis, the 19th chapter, and this deals with how an individual dealt with angels. Now, can you think of someone in the Bible who was a friend, called a friend of Jehovah's? Sister? Abraham is a real friend of Jehovah's because he did Jehovah's will. Did Abraham ever hold back anything at all? No, sir. He was sort of like, who else? Who did Abraham, brother? Well, yes, in a way, but who did he picture? Did anyone have an idea? In how was that? Go ahead. Well, all right. Yeah, in fact, he's just the same as did so. So he was a real friend of Jehovah's. He wouldn't hold back even his son if it was necessary. Put him to death if Jehovah said so. Now there's a real dedicated individual. So this had to do with Abraham, and it involved Abraham because Abraham's relative was in a bad situation. You know who was a relative of Abraham that was in a bad situation, sister? Lot. He was in a real bad situation, living in this corrupt city of Sodom and Gomorrah, that district. And so Jehovah, because of that, the friendship with him and Abraham, he sent 2 angels over to see Lot for the purpose of helping Lot. But now notice how this story develops. You read something here you've never read before. Now, starts here with verse number, in the 19th chapter, and maybe start reading with verse, I've lost my place here. Verse 14. I've got the wrong book. I was looking in Exodus. I was wondering why I didn't read right. All right. The 19th chapter. And this deals with an interesting situation. Start with verse 13. Let's do that. It says, "For we are bringing this place to ruin, because the outcry against them has grown loud before Jehovah, so that Jehovah sent us to bring the city to ruin." Now these were the angels talking to Lot. Now Lot knew these were angels, because when they approached the city and came on in, the town was so full of homosexuals, as it felt like it is today, that the homosexuals banded together and tried to attack these 2 strangers in town. And the angels blinded the eyes of the crowd so that they couldn't find the doorway of the house and break it in. So Lot and his family knew these 2 individuals were angels. Now get the picture. Here's two angels, and they know positively they're angels. Just like, now remember, you said the angels were shouting through these publications. Now these angels also shouted to Lot and his family, and they said to the family, and goes on in verse 13, they said, we're bringing the city to ruin. Then notice how Lot reacted in verse 14. It says, hence, Lot went on out and began to speak to his daughter, or his sons-in-law, who were to take his daughters, and he kept on saying, get up, exclamation point, get out of this place, because Jehovah is bringing the city to ruin, exclamation point. My, that really sounds impressive, doesn't it? Oh, Lot believed every word those angels said. That's the way it sounds. But notice how the sons-in-laws reacted. But it says, in the eyes of his sons-in-law, he seemed like a man who was joking. Destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Why, Lot, you're out of your mind. Well, these are the cultural centers of the world, they probably thought. Fellas are just having fun. Be broad-minded. There's nothing so wrong. Destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Lot, you're crazy. You think Jehovah's really going to destroy Los Angeles and Rialto? You think he is? You think he's going to kill all these people? Women and children? I've seen the cutest little babies and all. Are you going to destroy those? Well, that's what we say he's going to do. But you know, Lot said the same thing. He said they're going to destroy the city. But you know, Lot didn't believe one word of what he said. He didn't believe a word of it. Let me prove it to you. Read the next verse. It says, however, when the dawn ascended, verse 15, then the angels became urgent with Lot, saying, get up, exclamation point, take your wife and your two daughters who are found here, for fear you may be swept away in the air of the city, exclamation point. That was the next day. Lot was still at home, sitting on his, whatever it was, and doing nothing. Right? He still wasn't responding to what he was told. Although the day before, he had been out preaching to his sons-in-law, saying, get out of here, God's going to destroy the cities. But Lot didn't believe it himself. In fact, notice how ridiculous it gets. In verse 16, it says, when he kept on lingering, then in the compassion, you see, he kept on lingering even after that pep talk. And he knew these were angels. He knew it. He knew they were materialized angels, standing right there talking to him. Then he kept on lingering. Then it says, then in the compassion of Jehovah upon him, the men, those are the angels, seized hold of his hand, and of the hand of his wife, and of the hands of his two daughters, and they proceeded to bring him out and to station him outside the city. They physically drugged them outside of town. They had to be physically drugged because they wouldn't act on their own. Oh, they said they believed it. Oh, yeah, they said it. But they didn't believe it. Not one single word of it. In fact, if you read the account, notice how ridiculous it gets. And it came about that as soon as they had brought them forth to the outskirts, he began to say, escape for your souls. Do not look behind you, and do not stand still in all the district. Escape to the mountainous region, for fear you may be swept away. Then Lot said, not that, please, Jehovah. He didn't want to go to the mountains. He said, I'm scared of the mountains. I want to go to Zoar. I mean, he didn't even want to go to the mountains after he was drugged out, after they physically got him outside of the city and said, now run, then he didn't want to go. Did Lot believe what he was told? Of course he didn't believe what he was told. In fact, what happened to his wife? She was killed because she wouldn't do what she was told. She was even more stubborn than he was. She was told to flee and do not look back and to go. And she wouldn't go at all. In fact, she started back to the city as soon as she was let go of. So 1/4 of that family was destroyed by the very God that they said they worshipped and the God that was trying to save them. 1/4 was directly destroyed. That's why I ask you, brothers, how secure is your family? Because, brothers, this is serious business. The angels have been telling you and I exactly the same thing. Absolutely no different. And to think you and I can coast on into the new system, forget it. It takes only individuals, and at the assembly they make it real clear what it's all about. We're serving a God we love, and love motivates, doesn't make passive. Now the sad thing about this situation with Lot was, Lot should have known years before exactly how negative his wife was. He should have known she was not a lover of Jehovah. He should have known she was an individual who was attached to the system of things, had materialistic tendencies and maybe moral bad qualities. We don't know. But she liked the system and she was attached to it and she wouldn't break away from it. Now Lot should have known that. That's why I asked you husbands, How is your wife? And that's why I ask you wives, how is your husband? You should know each other. And you should know where the other one stands. And if the other one is not whole-souled, you should go home tonight and read this scripture and have a real soul-searching discussion. Real serious, including your children. And you children, if your parents don't want to talk about this, bring the subject up and say, Dad, let's discuss that scripture. See if we're all going to make it and talk about it. And make it a serious discussion. Because when this thing comes to an end, can we sleep when the wind hits and the storm breaks? Are we secure? It's a thing we should be like Paul, who said, I am free from the blood of all men because I have not held back. Not, I wonder, some will say it's going to be interesting who will survive. We'll find out who's going to be there. I'm not going to operate that way. This business of hoping I'm going to make it, or let's see who's going to be there, let's make sure. The Scripture even tells us to make sure of all things. To test out Jehovah. To serve Him whole soul. And then we'll be sure. Very positive. So that's our sad situation. Now, those people back there, they thought Jehovah was joking. And that it wasn't really going to happen. And we can display that within ourselves, that we can say it's a joke outright, like Lot's sons-in-law, or we can say it's a joke by our lack of action. That's the same thing. One tells you the same story as the other. In fact, the action or the lack of action tells you more than verbal expression. Just because I get up here and talk about this doesn't mean I'm whole-souled either. You'll have to watch me to see what I do. In fact, the Scripture says, those that take a lead among you observe their conduct, and as their action and conduct turns out, then you observe their faith. Only after you watch them. Because just because they say things doesn't mean much. Saying is easy. The doing is difficult. The doing proves, the saying proves nothing. Now, this happened to those people of Jehovah's back there over 3,800 and some years ago. 3,890 years ago. Now, you would wonder, after all those years, maybe 1,000 years after this, you think those Israelites had changed any? When they became a large nation and became the nation of Israel? After Abraham's seed multiplied and produced this big nation? Did they change from Lot? Well, let's look and see what it has to say in 1 Kings, the 18th chapter. And let's read this. This is about 3,000 years later. 1 Kings, the 18th chapter, and verse 21. Now, here this is an interesting setting because here's Elijah. He's raising a very challenging question. Now, notice who he's talking to, and notice the question. He says, Then Elijah approached all the people and said, How long will you be limping upon two different opinions? If Jehovah is a true God, go following him. But if Baal is, go following him. And the people did not say a word in answer to him. Isn't that interesting? He's talking to a nation of people dedicated to Jehovah. And yet he's asking them, how long are you people that are dedicated to Jehovah going to limp on two different opinions? I mean, if Jehovah's a true God, let's worship Jehovah. And if he's not, well, then let's worship Baal. But don't try to go two directions at once. Now, those Israelites knew who God was. They knew all about Jehovah. They'd seen his acts and his action, and they've seen his powerful works in their behalf, and they knew exactly who Jehovah was. But who is this God Baal? That's an interesting God. Baal is a god who is supposed to energize the soil, give birth to vegetation. He has an interesting wife, Ashtoreth, who is a goddess of fertility, and she was worshipped by temple prostitution. So Baal worship, now get it, see if this ties in with anything today. Baal worship was a worship that dealt with materialistic, sensual desires. Get it? Does that fit anything today? Materialistic and sensual? That's right. That ties into exactly what we have on the earth today. Now, what do you think is taking those that are Jehovah's people that go out of the truth? What do you think pulls them out of the truth? Materialistic, sensual tendencies. In fact, the same percentage of Jehovah's people are going out of the truth now as happened to the Israelites on their way across the wilderness to the Promised Land. On sensual, materialistic tendencies. They're wrapped up in that instead of serving their God Jehovah. So that's why Elijah raised the question to those ancient Israelites, the worshipers of Jehovah, and said to them, how long will you people be limping on two different opinions? Now let's get back on one way or the other. I mean, if Baal is a true God, well, let's worship Baal. But forget about this Jehovah. If he's not true, you're wasting your time. But if he's true, you better worship him. So he raised this challenging question. Now, if you were to read the book of Kings and read all about what took place then, he proposed we'll have a test to find out who's the true God. So they had the Baal priests get their altar, and they built an altar and put wood on it and a sacrifice. And then they danced around the altar and they called on their god Baal to consume the sacrifice. And they cut themselves with lances and drew a lot of blood and got all excited, sort of like a Pentecostal preacher, and nothing happened. Then Elijah was very patient, though. Remember how patient he was? He kind of kidded them a little bit, too. He said, now, don't get excited. Don't lose patience with your God. He's probably gone to the privy, and he'll be back shortly. But he never did show up. So then it was Elijah's turn. He built an altar and put the wood on it and the sacrifice and soaked it down with water, called on Jehovah in prayer, and instantaneously it came down and consumed the sacrifice. Fire from heaven. That proved who the true God was. So those Israelites flipped right back to pure worship. Oh, they were all for pure worship. Serve Jehovah. Let's go all the way. All for Jehovah. Yes, sir. Here we go. Right back again to the sensual, materialistic desires. Remember when they came back to build Jerusalem, what the thing was they built? Was it the temple they built first? Or what did they do? Remember any of that in your new Paradise book?
Start building their houses.
Yeah. Paneling their houses. Let's fix up the house and get me in good shape. Then we'll take care of Jehovah. It's exactly the way those Israelites operated. Then they would get a prophet amongst them. The prophet would get them back to serving Jehovah. Then they'd be all whole soul for Jehovah, whole souled until all of a sudden the prophet was gone and they were right back again. And they kept swinging back and forth like this till they swung totally out of Jehovah's favor. That's what happened to Jehovah's ancient witnesses. That's why the strong question was asked, how long will you people be limited? And Satan was so powerful and so clever that he deceived these Israelites into thinking that they could worship Jehovah as their nationalistic God and then pursue their self-centered desires and pursuits. That's what he had done to the Israelites. And that's what he's doing to many of us today. Thinking, oh yes, we can go to the Kingdom Hall, have a publisher's card, and go out in the service and put in our little 5 or 10 or 15 hours or whatever it is, and then we're going to get life. And then we can go on and pursue our little self-centered interests and desires. That's exactly what Satan did back there, and that's what he's doing today. Now, Satan doesn't care if you worship Jehovah. He doesn't care if you're baptized or go out in the service. He doesn't care about that at all. As long as you're not whole-souled. Now, there's only been 3 perfect people on this earth. 2 of them succumbed to Satan's attack. The third one, he got to the point he could talk and debate the issue with and tried to entice him. But don't you try to debate the issue with him because you'll never succeed. If 2 out of 3 of perfect people can't make it, don't ever try it. You and I can't. You can't even toy with it. You can't even begin to think about it. You've got to be whole soul for the Creator and what the Creator wants done. Now, I don't know if Jehovah's any different. It says in the Exodus that Jehovah was a God that exact exclusive devotion. It says in Malachi he's a God that, he says, I change not. So I wonder if he's any different today. You think you and I could get by with maybe dabbling in a little bit of everything? Serve Jehovah as a nationalistic God, go to church at the Kingdom Hall, and then serve yourself all the rest of the time, and then give him a little on the weekend and then serve yourself? You think we can get by with that? In the book of Mark. And notice what it says here about us today. In Mark, the 12th chapter, and verse number 30. Mark 12, verse 30. Now here's Jesus talking, and he's quoting from Deuteronomy. But when he quotes from Deuteronomy, he adds something to what Deuteronomy says. And he's asked here the most important command and so on. And then he said this, and you must love Jehovah your God with your whole heart, your whole soul, with your whole mind, and with your whole strength. Now we know that the soul is all of us. I mean, I'm a living soul, you are. So we wonder, why did he add these other things? In Deuteronomy it mentions heart and strength, but why did he add mind when that is really involved in the soul? Well, undoubtedly he's adding that so you and I as the Christians will not forget using our mind like the Israelites did in serving our God. They did not use their mind to the fullest extent of its capacity to advance the Master's interest. Well, they served Jehovah with their strength and with their heart, and they had a love for Jehovah and all, but they didn't use their full mental capacity. They used that for paneling their houses. They thought of ways to panel and fix up things for the Israelite, not to advance the pure worship. Only a few among them really were whole in all that they did. Now, you and I can never survive any better than an Israelite by giving less than complete all. So when it says whole soul, mind, heart, and strength, that leaves nothing out. Every desire, capacity, emotion, all your capabilities are fully involved. And if anything's left out, it's less than whole, and less than whole will get you less than life. It's that simple. Now, the thing is that we want to appreciate this because it says in the 110th Psalm, verse 3, that my people, he said, will offer themselves willingly. Now, we don't serve Jehovah because we're forced or pushed into it. He never does that. Now, he may have drugged Lot and his wife out of the city into the trying to get them life, but he won't do that with us. He'll not force us. Because if his ransom sacrifice won't move us, nothing will move us. You can't do anything greater to move a person's heart than to sacrifice your own son in their behalf. And if that won't move an individual, he can't be moved. You might move him by force, but as soon as you left off the force, he'd stop. He wants people that will not only move now, but move on into the new system and continue moving, serving him throughout all eternity. Now, that's the way it should be, but sometimes it's not that way. Now, I want you to read, like it says here in Ezekiel, what it has to say about people in the 34th chapter. Notice what it says here about serving Jehovah. 34:22. It says about Ezekiel talking here, and it's Jehovah is the one that's talking. 34:22. It says, "And I will save my sheep." And so we know that Jehovah will save his sheep. And he says, and they will no longer become something for plunder, and I will judge between a sheep and a sheep. You see, we take a great share now in separating the sheep from the goats out there, but once they get in here, then Jehovah separates the sheep from the sheep. And just because I say I'm one of Jehovah's sheep does not make it so. Unless he says so, it's not so. So it's very important that we find whether he calls us one of his sheep. And if we are, then we have a wonderful future. But notice what it says in the February 15th Watchtower. This little quotation, I'll just read it directly out of the Watchtower. It says, "Unfortunately, some persons claiming to be dedicated to God think and act as though their lives belong to them. They say they're dedicated, and then they act like this is still theirs. See, when you dedicate yourself, then this no longer belongs to you. You're not yours anymore. You've sold it." Does that make sense? That's not too complicated. Then it says this, "And these same individuals, they act as if they were free to proceed according to their own judgment. But the Apostle Paul says, you do not belong to yourselves. You were bought with a price. Glorify God." Now let's analyze this. It says, "Unfortunately, some persons claiming to be dedicated think and act like their life is still theirs." Now, can you understand why that would be unfortunate? Because if I act like my life is still mine, I might help some people into the truth, but I couldn't help in many into the truth as I would if I allowed Jehovah to move me. So that would be unfortunate. And I certainly won't get life, and that is very unfortunate. But the most unfortunate thing about it all is we don't bring praise to the Creator, and that's very unfortunate. So we want to be individuals who put Jehovah's interests first. And you might even look at it this way. Instead of some saying, well, use your time wisely, well, why not put it this way? Use Jehovah's time wisely, because he's bought your time. You sold it. Willingly and freely. Said, here, I'll sell it for the blood of Christ so I can have buy back what I've lost and I can gain everlasting life. You sold it. Not just for 5 months or 5 years, for eternity. It's no longer yours. Unless you can get a perfect life to buy it back, and we have none of those around. So it belongs to him. So we can't use what's his for our pursuits and our interests. And yet that's what we find is taking place. It seems like today there are still many individuals who are limping upon two different opinions right in the kingdom halls. Here's what it says in the Watchtower. This is the December the 1st Watchtower. It says, "Just as Ezekiel of old did not fail in performing his duties as a watchman, Jehovah's Witnesses as a body today will not fail to sound the warning." Now, Jehovah's Witnesses as a body are really sounding the warning. But it says individuals, however, may fail because of allowing their love for Jehovah and fellow humans to be crowded out by other affections. That's what's happening. So it is important for everyone to consider seriously whether his heart is motivating him aright. This article was, "How much do you care about people?" written to Jehovah's Witnesses. Then it says this, "Perhaps you have spent many years in the preaching and disciple-making work. Then you have reason to be more zealous now than ever before." Now, why is it that someone that's been in the truth 20 years, 10 years, or 30 years should be more zealous than these new ones that are coming in? And by the way, the new ones are zealous. Why should the older ones be more zealous? More knowledge, more understanding, that's true. All right. They've seen that. There's a more important reason, though, sister. They've seen prophecies, but those things will never move you. Those things will never move you. Sister Durrell? That's right. The love deepens, and the love is what moves you. No love, you'll never move. Knowing all these things won't move you that far. All you'll do is like Lot, you'll say, yes, God's going to destroy the system. Better get out of town and do what we're told to do. Then you sit down. Someone comes around, oh, I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Go out in the service and tell people about it, because God's going to destroy the system. Then you sit down and forget about it. But when you love Jehovah, you, like it says, you become more zealous than ever before. And there are many older ones in the congregations. I don't know how many you may have here, but I've met some at these circuit assemblies that are amazing, been in the truth since 1902. I know one old couple that really used their full mental capacity. Him and his wife, they could do nothing in the ministry. They were sick and old, and he had a bad heart. He can't even get to the assemblies. And his wife is arthritic and can't walk, has to sit in a chair. She sleeps in the chair. She can't even get out of the chair. So they prayed to Jehovah about, we want to serve you. We're dedicated. We love you. We want to do your work. And they prayed about it and cried about it and cried and prayed and talked to their elders and prayed and cried and thought and prayed. And he said, I've got an idea. I've got a way we can serve Jehovah. We can't leave our house, but we can serve Jehovah. It would take an hour to tell the story, but you know how many truth books they placed in the last 2 years? How many truth books could an elderly couple who can't even leave their house place in a 2-year period? Think they can place 100? You think they can place 500? You think they can place 5,000? You think they can place 10,000? Well, they placed 11,777 truth books in a year, and at the last assembly they read a letter from the placement of one of these books to a president of a university's daughter who wrote him after he had mailed her the book, and she said in the letter, started off, Dear brother, he had brought her into the truth, 86 years old, never left his house, and brought the little gal into the truth. Yes, people who love their Creator are more zealous than ever before. The longer you know Him, the more you love Him. Now, we have to think about that and not be divided in our interests and our pursuits, because it's awfully easy for us to become divided like those Israelites. And this society is designed to do it. It's run by Satan, and Satan is a tremendous success. And he's killed people over the centuries. He wiped out an entire nation of Jehovah's people. And he's trying it with us, but he won't succeed, but he will with individuals within it. Just watch yourself and your position, because he's a powerful force. Don't you ever underestimate him. Kind of reminds me of the story of about this limping on two different opinions is kind of an interesting thing. To limp on two different opinions means to walk in a labored or jerky movement. It means to proceed in a lame or a faulty way, to limp. So someone who's limping is proceeding, but he's faulty. He never gets there. And the word lame means deficient in quality and quantity, insufficient. You never get there. Limping on two different opinions is bad. It kind of reminds me of the mugwump. You know what a mugwump is? They were asking, and they're talking about that in social science in school, and the teacher said, well, what's a mugwump? And Johnny, right away, Johnny had up his hand. Johnny knew what a mugwump was. And the teacher said, well, Johnny, what's a mugwump? And Johnny said, well, that's easy, teacher. That's someone sitting on a fence. His mug's on one side and his wump's on the other. Well, technically Johnny was about right, because if you were to look up mugwump in a dictionary, you'd find out what they are. The mugwumps were a political party that existed in the early days of the United States. And they're defined in the dictionary as this. They were individuals who acted as independents, who refused to support wholeheartedly any given cause. Those are the ancient Israelites. They were mugwumps. That's what Elijah was talking to. A bunch of mugwumps that wouldn't get off the fence. They wouldn't make up their mind. That's why he said, how long are you people going to limp on two different opinions? Get off the fence. And that's what we had in the early days of the United States. A mugwump political party. Wouldn't support anything wholeheartedly. Now, the thing is, we find in the organization today, many brothers and sisters, if you were to trot a flag up here and say, salute the flag, you'd die before you salute the flag. Take a blood transfusion, you'd lay there and bleed to death before you take a blood transfusion. Go off to war, couldn't force you to go to war. You young brothers would go off to a concentration camp and have them all lock you up. Wouldn't bother you a bit. But the interesting thing is, Jehovah requires more than that. Because we find these individuals who won't do these certain things, they won't either mature and becoming wholehearted in their service of the preaching of this good news door to door, preaching and disciple making. Now, Jehovah requires that we die for him, yes, but he also requires that you live for him. It says in Romans that he wants a sacrifice living, not a dead sacrifice. If you won't serve Jehovah when you've got the life force within you, and then you stand up against the wall and have someone bayonet you because of some political issue, what value is that? No value. He wants something alive that'll serve him. Like when we were up north in a small town. After we got back down here, we got a letter from a family, and one of the young brothers was dead, and I couldn't believe it. The young brother was 6 foot, good-looking and dark, tall, wavy hair, intelligent, an A student, outstanding publisher, gave excellent talks from the platform. His father was a servant in the congregation. Couldn't believe it. The young brother, when he got to be 19, he moved out and moved in with another young brother. And they liked cars, powerful cars. And their dad always gave them a good money so they could buy a good car. And he hopped it all up like lots of you see them around Kingdom Halls. The rear end up in the air, painted white underneath with slicks in the back and mag wheels. You've seen the type. That's what he always drove. And yet he was a good publisher, yet his inclinations were the wrong direction. And so when he moved in with this young boy, they died in his stone clear. When he got into the hospital, the doctor said he has to have a blood transfusion. And the boy came semi-conscious, and he says, "No, I don't take blood because I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses." His parents got to the hospital and said, "That's right, we don't take blood. He's one of Jehovah's Witnesses. We follow Bible principles." The doctor said, "Okay, I'll go to the court order." So he went to get a court order, and when he got back, the boy was dead. And the doctor was furious. You people don't make any sense at all. You're willing to let your boy die over some blood problem that you think is important, which we do, and he stuck to that. But then he says you give him a high-powered car and turn him loose in the streets. You don't make any sense. You people don't make any sense. So the headlines in the paper said, Jehovah's Witness runs wild in the street, killed when he hits tree, refuses blood. What do you think that did for Jehovah's name? It's like it says, unfortunately, some who claim to be dedicated to God think and act as though their lives are still theirs. No, God requires that you not only die for him, but you better live for him, otherwise there'll be no life. It's that important and it's that serious. The Creator's name is far more important than you and I. All of us together don't even stand up, don't make a dent in the importance of his name compared to us. We're very unimportant. Totally nothing compared to his name. And yet here his name was smeared all over it. Well, the young boy driving the car, of course, has blood guilt. Police brought charges of manslaughter against him, and the committee had to take action. Makes you wonder about the parents, because when I used to serve the congregation, the parents would take off on a weekend, and they couldn't be there for the final talk because they had to go on a vacation. I wonder who's really to blame. That's why I say, how secure is your family? Do you know where your family stands? Are they whole-souled in their service of Jehovah? Now's the time to find out. Don't wait till some disaster strikes. And if we find ourselves limping on two different opinions, well, get off the fence, because a fence is an uncomfortable place. Get on Jehovah's side and serve Jehovah. Serving Jehovah involves having his spirit, involves his fruitages of his spirit, involves love and joy, peace and mildness and kindness and goodness. All these good qualities that we want to have which bring happiness. Those other things that the Israelites pursued, which some of us are involved in, they don't lead anywhere. Nothing but misery, and you're going to lose everything you've got anyway. But let's serve this Creator, whole soul. Now, we find in some congregations there are no pioneers yet. Makes you wonder why. In Japan, they have 1/4 of the congregations are pioneers. We just got a letter from over in Beverly Hills, which we think is encouraging, from Brother Couch, if you happen to know him. He just wrote and said all the elders now in Beverly Hills are pioneers. And you know what the key to the success is in pioneers according to the Kingdom Ministry? Does anyone remember what it was, the key to success? What makes congregations pioneer? Remember that insert? When the elders take the lead and pioneer, they'll pioneer. We have one in San Bernardino with 11 pioneers. All the elders are pioneers but one. See, so let's think about where we stand and what our position is. Let's think about lives, those out there that Jehovah sacrificed his son for. Don't worry so much about yours. You take care of those other things, you automatically get life. And the Creator will see to it that we do. And the way we appreciate more about Jehovah, of course, is study his word, understand it. Now, the more you learn about Jehovah, it causes you to do what about him? The more you know of Jehovah, the more you love him. And the more you love Jehovah, the more you serve him. You do his will. So think about it seriously. And this assembly, let us serve Jehovah whole-souled, doesn't talk in such a circle as we have here. It'll be more direct so you can understand what has to be done and how to do it. So we appreciated your attention. Now, Sister Durrell and I and Brother Johnson and Sister Johnson will be here tomorrow morning at what time? I didn't hear the time. 8:30 or 8:30? Very good. Tomorrow morning and Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And you'll also be here Saturday, I believe, at 9, is it? You'll meet at the Assembly Hall Saturday. So why don't you come out and join us in the ministry? I'll tell you what we've been having at Kingdom Halls is something is moving the brothers. Just to be here, there's 293 here tonight. And we've been having gatherings of upward to 100 every day for service. So something's moving us, brothers. Just let it move you. Don't resist it in any way. And we walk on and get life, see? Now, tomorrow morning, Sister Durrell and I will be here. The Johnsons will be too. We have to come in from Norco, and so we won't be here in the afternoon because things are so crowded at the Assembly Hall. We're having a midweek assembly as well as one on the weekend with you. So we'll just be here in the morning. But Brother Johnson will be with you all day with Sister Johnson, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. All right? Any questions about our week's activity? Can you sleep on a windy night? Think about it. And then discuss that scripture with your family in Genesis 19 about Lot. Very serious.